Talofa, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Polynesianize podcast. Masi, how are you doing today? How's everything in your neck of the woods?
Doing good here in Auckland, New Zealand, Manurewa. Getting colder, but it's nice. It's Saturday evening here. Nothing too crazy. Wife busy with some funeral, and I'm just here at home holding down the fort at home. So, yep, all good.
Excellent. Yep, same thing here. Closed out a work week. It's the weekend. We're excited for that. Also, my kids' last day of school was today for my older two. So we're
Mm,
getting ready for the summer.
summer break.
So
How
we're
long is summer
excited for
break?
that.
How long is summer break there?
So it's usually like a couple months. So June, July, and then mid August to
August.
end of August is when school will kick back in.
Nice, nice break.
So yeah, good break. My kids are gonna do some camps, some different things. So we're excited for that. But not as excited as we are for this episode.
Yes, sir.
So we've had a lot of activity on social media. Appreciate all the viewers, all the listeners,
Yes.
comments on Facebook, uh, YouTube, and especially on TikTok. There's been a lot of activity on TikTok. And with that, to really kind of show and express our appreciation, we get a lot of questions. Honestly, we can't comment on every comment. Like literally, unfortunately, we do have day jobs. And so this is the side gig. This is not what pays the bills.
this is
So
this is just a fun passion that we both have, and we just when we have
exactly,
time we do it.
exactly. And so we appreciate we go through the comments, we go through it. We just can't respond to all of them. And today we're going to give a reaction to a video that was given by a follower, a listener on TikTok. And
Mm.
I'm going to go ahead here and just add them here before we go into their request. So I'm just going to add it real quick. So this is from Victor Crum. He tagged us on a couple of videos. The one we're going to go through is the video with
TED
Dr.
Talk.
Opeti Taliai, who gave a TED Talk,
TEDx. Yeah.
TEDx in Nuku'alofa, Tonga. So we're gonna look into this video. Are you familiar with this individual, Masi? I've never really heard of them, or I'm not familiar with them. Um,
Mm, yeah, I'm not familiar with this person. The only person I've kind of known that's kind of talked about Tongan history, kind of the same time with Dewi Tafale. Dad is Mahina.
okay,
Okushi Tino Mahina. But I've never heard of this guy. It's kind of my first time. But I believe when he did this TEDx talk thing, it was filmed here in New Zealand, but they just mentioned it like Tonga because I guess talking about Tongan
oh,
history.
so
Yes,
it was actually filmed in New Zealand. I was under
to
the
my
impression.
understanding, yes, yes.
Hmm,
But
all right,
yeah,
all right.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was filmed in New Zealand, but they put Nuku'alofa there. But I could be wrong.
Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, like I said, I'm not very familiar with him. Um, we'll switch here. I guess he's an anthropologist according to this
Mm.
description under under his name here, but we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Masia, unless you have
No,
any
let's
other
let's do
questions.
it. Let's do it. Give the people what they want to hear.
Hey, I like that. Give the people what they
What they
want.
wanna.
All
And
right.
this was referenced. This was referenced, so we'll do it.
Yes. All right. Let's jump into it.
Marale, my name is Opeti Taliai, Tongan born, now living in New Zealand. I am an academic researcher currently working on a book which is a rewriting of Tongan history. As you can see from the title of my talk, it's re-examining Tongan history. I want to talk first about two problems that I experienced in my work on Tongan history, just to share with you about my main concern here regarding my work. The first problem is a type of history. Biographical history goes back to a French critic of the 19th century by the name Charles-Augustin Saint-Beuve, who, with his classical statement of "by their fruits ye shall know them," stated that biographical history is a passionate piece of autobiography, a personal account of one's own life, which is a statement that I found very appropriate in my reading of Tongan history, particularly of the book written and published in 1999 by Elizabeth Wood Allen called Queen Charlotte of Tonga, where...
Any thoughts on what he just kind of shared there, real quick, Masi?
No, I'm not too familiar with this Wood Allen. Apparently, she wrote like a biography, or she followed Queen Charlotte around. Looks like it, and just kind of record what she talks about, or her conversation. And then the Frenchman that he mentioned, I'm not too familiar with that person either, Tua. But yeah, those are my initial thoughts. I'm not too familiar with those two authors,
Yeah.
Palangi
Uh,
authors. But
Yeah, I kind of, I guess I'm trying to understand. He's obviously referencing them and saying by their fruit, which obviously is a biblical reference.
yes.
Though he kind of seems to infer that that was something that was coined by that historian from France. And, he's saying, so I'm just trying to gauge this correctly. What he's saying is, using this French historian, he's saying that the way we should view biographical history is that it is heavily tainted by personal experience.
Okay.
And I guess that's what he's trying to get to
Okay.
is you have a biography of history, but in many ways it's just a autobiography of an individual person's experience, which in many ways is technically true, right? We all experience reality from our own perspective. And that's what history is. I mean, we cannot read other people's minds. We
Mhm.
What we see, even though we're all looking at the same event, could be something very, very different from what someone else sees and their perspective, because it is in many ways subjective. So,
Mm.
I mean, I'm just trying to see if that's what he's trying to get to, is recorded history is extremely subjective, especially to one individual person's experience, which is
Mm.
true. And he's gonna, it looks like he's gonna bring it into Queen Salote here.
Mm.
But I mean, that was just what I was just trying to understand. If you think that that's what he's kind of getting to, I'm just trying to understand where we think he's gonna lead with
Yeah.
that, starting off with the French historian's perspective. But
Yeah. No, I'm
yeah,
not too sure. I'm not too sure. I'm still trying to figure him out. But yeah, with those two authors, I'm not. Yeah, I just
yeah,
don't know.
okay, 10-4. We'll keep going.
Elizabeth quoted Queen Charlotte as to say that Tongan history is what the highest chief says. That's a clear indication of a biographical kind of history that I'm referring here. And of course, this direct quote is a reference to Queen Charlotte herself as the highest chief. I want to bring in
I think some interesting things to keep in
What?
mind here
Yes. Share.
is number one, that is true about every civilization, right?
Yeah.
You know, like that famous line from Aladdin, right?
Mm.
He who has the gold makes the rules, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just the nature. Who writes the history? The person who wins the battle typically
Mm.
is the one who dictates. So it seems like he's going to try and identify this as a problem for Tonga, which it could be true under that perspective. But
Yeah.
when we zoom out, this is a human problem. This is a
Mm.
global problem because history is written by those who have power, right?
Mm.
We don't always get to hear the story of the loser. Everybody
Mm.
kind of we aren't sitting all the time and like, hey, you remember that guy who came in fifth place 50 years ago in the Olympics? Like, no, we
Mm.
typically talk about the winner, and that's where the story goes. But yeah, that's the first thing that I want to bring up there. The second one is to say that Queen Salote is the most powerful chief
Mm.
is not always an accurate description. Even
Mm.
even even in European perspectives, right?
Mm-hmm.
The king often, many times, was a puppet. If the king was a weak king,
Mm-hmm.
so just because you're quote unquote in what is presented as the highest position doesn't mean that you have the levers of power,
Mm.
right? And I think that's one thing. And then to kind of come back to Tonga situation, Queen Salote did not necessarily descend from the closest tie or the rightful heir to the Tuitonga line,
Mm-hmm.
which for many, many years was the most powerful line. And in cultural events, there was some discrepancy. The political and the
Mm.
military power, yes, in Queen Salote's realm, but in certain areas of the cultural and the social aspect of things, that was not always the case. So I think
Mm.
that's important context to keep in mind as he kind of dives into the fact that quote unquote Queen Salote is the most powerful chief.
Yeah. No. And just to add on, you remember the circumstances of Queen Charlotte were a lot different compared to Tupou the First. Tupou the First, it was recognized in Tonga. Laufudi Tonga would transition the power and the protocols to Tupou the First, right?
Mhm.
And it was Tonga was very peaceful and prosperous during that time too. And then came to the Tupou the Second. Tonga was still in good grounds, but it was a bit, starting to get a little fragile a little bit. But then even when Queen Charlotte was made queen, it was very important because Tonga was getting a little bit weaker because people, especially in Hahake, with the Tungi line, that it was called Tungi, but they trace it all the way to they're the direct descendants of the Tu'iha Tagalawa. It was very, very important for Queen Charlotte to marry Tungi Mailefihi in order to solidify Tonga to be
Yes.
peaceful. So that's one thing I would say when he mentioned Queen Charlotte. The Queen Charlotte is the highest chief. Was it was she was made the highest chief because of being married to me. So there's that aspect to it because during that time, uh, Charlotte was not even when she was growing up, she was not even chosen by many of the
Yes.
advisors to even ascend to the throne. She was the absolute
Exactly.
last choice, but to make her relevant and make her stronger, influence and politically, she had to marry Tungi Mailefi from Mu'a. So
Yes.
that's another thing I want to add to that. She wasn't the highest chief solely on her Tuikan Kumpolu line
Yeah.
itself. Like I said, to both the first and the second, they were fine. But when it came to her time with Queen Salote, the third, to both the third, she was on very fragile ground just with the whole political
In debt,
structure of
the
Tonga.
country's
Yes,
in debt. There's
debt and
foreign and internal struggles, power
yes,
struggles.
yes. So that's I want to add to some context to that too.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
and I agree because I mean, he's presenting it as it's like, oh, Queen Salote has supreme,
yeah,
and granted, she's the queen, she's the sovereign, but like you were mentioning, she was ordained overnight. Why?
Yes.
Because there was risk of British overtaking of the government, right? Because Tonga was in debt, right?
Mhm.
We had, and then there's also the other claims to the throne that
Yeah.
could have been in Tonga. So, like you were mentioning, there's a lot of power dynamics here. I think that's important. Like you're saying, these are items that are important to consider. That Queen Salote wasn't just sitting on this solid
Yeah.
dome of authority. Like all politics, it is a fragile thing. Power is a fragile thing to maintain, which
Yes.
is to go to complement not only Queen Salote, because her marriage to Tungi did solidify a lot of support internally in Tonga,
Mm.
and it also brought a lot of stability internally and externally. And in many ways, Queen Salote's rule was a unifying rule. She was so beloved because of her temperament. She loved music, she loved the people, and so all of those things came together to really
Yes.
solidify the current line of kings in their favor amongst the Tongan people.
Yeah. Correct.
So now I think that's good. I think that's important for the viewers to kind of keep that in mind as he talks about
Yes.
Queen Salote's power and role here.
A point made by the English poet Thomas Gray, who disputed with his landscape poetry, disputed Saint Bill's biographical argument by saying that it is essential to judge a literal work in quotation independently from my knowledge of the man himself. Man himself in that quotation refers to St. Bill. Thomas Gray emphasized that we, historian or critic, need to produce certain intellectual and emotional effects on a reader. Let's sum up briefly that point on biographical history. The other point that I want to mention is this problem regarding oral and written history. I am reminding here that Tongan history or Tongan way of thinking is still very much poetic. By poetic, people still think in a poetical way, even talking, rather than going straight to the point, which is the scientific characteristic of language. English is an example. Tongans tend always to go around the point. By mentioning the oral history, also reminds me of Queen Salote in her later book, compiled together with this English historian, Elizabeth Bott, where Queen Salote reiterated this biographical type of history that she is trying to emphasize. In that book of Queen Salote with Elizabeth Bott, she starts the book with a genealogy of herself and her family in Tonga. And goes on to say that with that genealogy, Tongan history starts from there. So she's referring here, this genealogy refers to Tonga Urakimaka. And from this Tonga, right down to the present, is the Tongan history. She is cutting off the former part of the history of the Tonga before Tonga Rakimata, by saying that all those Tonga before Rakimata were Samoans. Not only that, but they lived most of their life in Samoa, traveling back and forth, Samoa and Tonga. Whereas Rakimata was the first Tonga to stay input in Tonga, build this empire of Tonga Empire up to today.
Any thoughts on that?
Interesting. I'm just interested too. If do you by chance can pull up Dad's list of Tuitongas? Because
Yes.
I want to see what number was it Tuitonga Wakimata? That's what he's saying. That's where Tongan history actually starts.
Well, that's when
Um,
he's saying that the quote unquote Tongan Empire, and that's where Queen Salote is saying is technically and
where, yeah,
and I think if you could cover Masi why, and I'm gonna pull up
yeah,
the line here, but the importance of when we say that they were Samoan, we don't argue. Number one,
yes.
Samoa was not an independent nation. But
That's where we
number
correct him
two,
at that. Yes, we'll correct
yes,
him there. Yeah,
is when he says, "Oh, they were Samoan." That's like
there was no
saying
there was
he
no
was
such
from
thing. Yeah,
Ha'atejo, right?
yeah,
That's all part of Tonga. Like Samoa was not an independent nation. But
yeah,
also, if while I'm pulling this up, just walk through. That's correct. Let's just correct that. We've corrected the idea of how to think of Samoa. It's not an
yeah,
independent nation. It's just like another island within the Tongan Empire.
yeah,
So, and that's where, but understanding how the inheritance, the patriarchal structure, and
yeah.
why it was never a foreign male that inherited the Tuitonga. While I pull up
Yes. No,
the
yeah,
Tuitonga
no,
lines.
yeah. Just to add on to your thoughts too, like we've discussed in our previous discussions, that yes, the Samoan women from the islands, we can even just say from Upolu, because I feel like maybe that's probably an older name, and Upolu or Savai women would marry the Tuitonga title holders, and yes, they would create offspring and create the future leaders of the Tuitonga titles, and that could that's correct, but at the same time, um, like I said, and you said it too, that the Tuitonga titles had to be people from the island Tongatapu, because why? Your political influence came from there, and your inheritance of land, or even sphere of influence, came from your male side. So as long as you were male from Tongatapu, you could marry any woman from any island in the Pacific. They would inherit the title, because Tonga has practiced this for thousands of years of passing titles from father to son, many, many, many generations. So were they Samoan women from Upolu and Savai that created the future leader of the Tuitonga? Yes. So that is correct, but he's not understanding. Dr. Tariai is not understanding the reasons of why it was Tongan males. There was no male line from Upolu or Savai that inherited the Tuitonga title. But yeah, so we're looking for Ulwaki Mata. So that's what he's stating. That's when Tongan history starts, and also he's I think I mean, this is no offense to Dr. Tariai, but I don't, I'm assuming he's understanding history from the books. I think he really understands that this was even up to Uwaki Mata, and even the Tuitongas, after him. they were always traveling between Tonga Tapu and Samoa. So just because they were staying in Samoa doesn't mean that they were like
Oh,
Samoan. So that's a thing, because if that was, and this is the other argument I would also argue, if when they were staying in Samoa and they were considered whoever, like, Upolu or Savai, like if they were from there, they would they would be langis there, buried, and
yes.
they would create land mounds in Samoa for their burial, if that was true, that they stayed there and perceived that that was the headquarters. And that's what I'm trying to say. The headquarters, like a business organization, headquarters were always in the island of Tongatapu, but they were free to roam and stay however long they wanted to, wherever, whichever in their empire. But when it came times for their death or near death, or for like the Inasi or Polo Polo, they came back to Tonga. It wasn't done in Upolu, Savai, or
Yeah.
Tutuila, or even Manua. So that's just my explanation with that.
I downloaded the
Do
wrong one, Masi. Give me a second
No
because
worries, no
that
worries.
one was a spreadsheet just to kind of identify the first few, because Urakimata is way further down on the list,
Okay,
which is to say, look at how much is quote unquote being left
miss.
out,
Yes,
right? So
yeah,
let me pull up the correct one. I think I
yeah.
just found it right now.
No, and just to add on too, I know this doctor, and it seems like he's relying on perspectives from out foreigners to interpret to interpret Queen Salote and the history that they're explaining, which can be misconstrued at times. But you know, we'll
Yeah.
we'll see
So
here.
yes. So just for perspective, so Urakimata, which was not the oldest, he
No.
was the oldest of one wife, but he had a brother. His mom and his brother's mom were sisters,
Mm,
right? And
mm,
Romueki, he is right here. So this is
mm.
Urakmata right there, the
Yes, 44.
44th.
Hmm.
So if we were to accept that, look at how many hundreds of years
Yeah,
going back of
yeah,
Tuitongas that we're talking about.
yeah. And he's only suggesting, and that's the thing. He's putting the I guess this articles from this person recording Queen Salote, talking to her, saying that it starts from Tongan history, actually starts from Uraki Mata, just because he actually lived in Tonga. To me, like I said, that's very invalid, and I don't know if he really understands Tongan history, because I don't know where the Taliai family are from or where he's from, but like I said, it seems like they don't have any connections to Mua to really understand the Tuitonga line and how it was common to travel back and forth all the time.
Yes.
So
And
yeah, that's my
and
that's my issue with his point there, that he's inaccurate.
so, and I think this is really important. So Telea, right, is
Yeah.
Urakimata. That's who he's referencing, and Tapuosi is the father.
Mm,
So we're we're speaking here. We're trying to be objective. So just so the viewers and the listeners, because we get a lot of people sometimes, especially outside of Tonga and even in Tonga, who say,
mm,
"Where do you get this stuff from? You know, whatever. How do
yeah.
you know that?" And in respect to this doctor, he happens to be bringing up something that's very close to our family, and that's
Mm,
why we're going to dive into this.
yeah.
So I'm going to pull up Google Earth just so that people
While
can
you're doing
reference it.
Yes.
Yeah, go
No,
ahead,
while you're
Masi.
doing that, Tua, I've also remember seeing some comments. Somebody mentioning about the list too of the Tuitongas and stuff. And the list we're going for is from Devita Fale, who's our father, and he's actually corrected the list from Shirley Baker, because the first Tuitonga list that many academics went by was Shirley Baker's list, which was really short, and also the Catholics priests had their own
Hmm.
list. which were short. And Devita Fale, dad, was able to go and correct them and add the correct Tuitonga lines. And like I said, we've these names were only created because our dad, Devita Fale, was able to actually go to each of their mounds and
Yes.
langis or fad, yeah, their langis around Tongatapu and even locate them. And that's how he verified that these are the correct names. The priest and Shirley Baker were not capable or did not have the capacity to do that. And if we do, like I said, there's thousands of mounds and langis in Tonga. If there's going to be more things that we find, the list could even get longer. But this is what we
Yes,
have now.
100%. I really do believe that every time there's archaeological work done,
Yeah,
the timeline doesn't get shorter, it gets longer.
yeah,
So there's a couple of things that I think are important. So when we talk about Tapu Osi, right?
yeah,
He had those two sons, and basically the reason why it's Uwaki Mata is he told his two sons, as he knew he could tell he was getting older in age. He says, the first son that I see, because they're both the eldest,
mm,
they both
mm-hmm.
have claims to the
Yes,
Tuitonga because they're the firstborn and their mothers were sisters,
sisters.
right? So he said, the first face that I see to come from Samoa is going to be the next Tuitonga. So
Mm,
he sent the boats out there. And this is where Uraki Mata's Langi is, Pai
yeah,
Telea, right? So
mm-hmm,
he had the name Telea and Uraki Mata
mm-hmm,
as that Tuitonga. Our family properties include here,
yeah.
right next to it. And
That's
also,
Lakfoid. Yeah,
yeah, Lakvoe. And then we also have here, Pareamahu, right next. This
yes,
is land that has been in our families for hundreds, possibly
yes,
thousands of years. And to connect this story even further, this is Tapu Osi's Langi,
which is
Malamaloa.
the father, which is the
Yes, which
father,
is the
correct?
father of Telea, of Urakimata. And this whole area, right? This whole area right here is called Vakatalata. Because
Yeah,
why? Lomueki, the older brother. Now, granted, when we say older, different mothers, but just in
mm,
age, when he heard about the death of his father, Tapu Osi, who's buried right here,
mm-hmm,
he said, that's why it's Vakata Lata. It means Lata is like how comfortable. So he was enjoying himself in
mm,
Samoa. But once
mm,
he heard that his father died, he could no longer stay in Samoa. He said, I could now no longer enjoy. So he moved back to
mm.
Tonga, even though he wasn't going to be the Tuitonga. By the time he came back, his brother was already made the
Installed.
Tuitonga.
Yeah,
And so that's what this place is. And to make this story even closer,
yeah,
nothing personal against the doctor, but where Tapu Osi lays, our grandfather lays, and our grandfather's father, and a lot of our right here. So he is speaking about a family story
mm-hmm,
that we are very close with and we're very familiar with.
yeah,
And this is where our father will be buried. And
yeah,
if Masi or any of our siblings or cousins choose to be buried, that's where they'll be. And
yeah,
so I really think it's not to try and indulge. We're just
yeah,
trying to say, for those who say, well, how do you know these things? Well, this
yes,
is one small part. These
yes,
are stories that are very close to us, and we're very familiar with these
yeah.
stories.
No, and
And
just to add
so,
on,
go ahead,
no,
Mas.
just to add on to we're not trying to Fiamea or
Hmm.
whatever. But in order for us to tell the correct history, we have to bring these up why we're comfortable speaking on certain truths because it is the truth. And just to add context to these, we're outside of Kalani Valu, who's the noble that's in charge of a lot of the langis in La Paja, and I think there's some langi that's under Tuila Kepa in Talasiu. We're the only other family that has a langi that we're in charge of where Tapu Osi is buried, that it's in our caretaker. So we don't speak just because we pick it thin air or we heard stories. These are actually in our family history, and that's why we're correcting a lot of these. And this is no offense to some of the academics that are out there. They don't have those close ties, and they're trying their best off of books or what they heard or what they hear from maybe their interactions and stuff, and they're not from the source. And this is where their flaws at, and this is why we're just doing our best to try to tell the correct Tongan history, so
Not
that the future
100%.
generations can be on the right understanding of Tongan history. But yeah.
No, I agree, and that's something that and we'll continue to listen to the doctor here, but for 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 everybody to understand that, to say that it was Samoan ruled prior to that. So I'm getting the feeling that Dr. Opeti Taliai is trying to say that Queen Salote is trying to hide something, or trying not, and I think we need to be careful. And I made a comment on this in some of our social media. Politics is a very fragile thing. There
Mm,
are reasons why certain leaders don't dig too deep into certain things, because why? It could negatively impact their political position. And it's not to say that it says they don't have any claim. What it's saying is, why open up a can of worms that's not necessary for the conversation? So
yeah.
we don't have to think, "Lo, Queen Salote is hiding something or she's incorrect." It's
Yeah.
she's talking about something, and maybe she has a specific goal or a target. And
Yeah.
that's why she's saying, I want to start from Ulakimata and move
Mm,
forward. And
yeah.
we'll see what his response is. But I do feel like he's trying to critique um, Queen Salote's approach with this autobiographic history,
Mm,
that because she is the most powerful chief, that she may have some bias or some kind of misunderstanding or trying to
mm.
hide something. I don't know.
Misconceptions too, and all of these kind of things. Yeah.
Exactly. So we'll see what he's kind of digging into. But I feel
Yeah.
like that's where the direction of the conversation is going.
Okay.
I'll come back to that point later on in my talk, but I want to touch on two oral traditions to illustrate my argument how important is oral history when we come to talk about Tongan history.
And I think we would agree with that statement, right? I mean,
Yeah.
oral history is critical, and a very important part of understanding Polynesian history, especially since it wasn't written.
Yeah.
But there's one more question to ask. What
What
is
is
the
it?
source? What is the
Yes.
source of your oral history,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Are you going, and like we've used this example before, when you see your neighbor, you know, and you go there to ask where they come from, are you going to the little kid who's eating ice cream at the front and, hey, where are you from? Little kid doesn't always know. They might have heard a few things here and there, and
mm,
will try and give you as much as they understand. But that's a lot shakier than if you go to the adults,
mm.
right? And even more important, the adults with the access and the knowledge of the correct oral history. So it's not just oral history. We don't just go to a Cava and believe every story, because, like you're saying, Tongans are very poetic. They're
Yes.
they're they're not driven like the Western mentality is, directness to the truth.
Yes.
Polynesian mentality is, we'll throw a couple things at you, and if you gobble up the joke, then we're just gonna leave you at the joke, right?
And let
But
it
if
be.
you're
And let it
exactly, but if you're able to navigate and be like, hey, these things don't make sense, then they're like, oh, this guy actually, or this girl seems to be pretty knowledgeable. Well, maybe we'll give them a little bit more.
Mm,
So just want to give that nuance. Any thoughts before we jump into the oral history? But I think overall we agree with that
yeah.
that thought.
Yeah. No. Thoughts are no. Tongans are very always indirect, and especially even to other Tongans. I can just imagine like with people they don't even know when you're invited to somewhere, they're not gonna. Every family has a treasure. They just don't. Even if people come and ask academics, they want to record. They're not just gonna give it to somebody or give it to anybody. Like I said, there it's a treasure, and they'll give you a little bone, give you here and there, or maybe just give you a little bit here. But and then add some little things here and there that's probably can take you another way, and they'll just see how you act. But Tongan historians and stuff, they don't just give things for the sake of it. So it's a very fragile way, and even people when they go Faikawa, especially when you go a perfect place to learn all these things and the intricacies of how to navigate these complexities is at the Tongan Faikawa, because you get everyone from different social rank and status in society, and you find out who are the ones who are doing something else, who are the ones who are have something that can share. So yeah,
Yeah.
and usually most people have a hard time to navigate that. So
Yes. And a big part of it is because it takes a lot of time
mm,
and people aren't willing to put in the time. Like you were saying,
yeah,
it's the relationship over decades
yeah,
that maybe this information will be slowly add up, and you have to add up these little pieces over time,
yeah,
but if you're just showing up for 1 and 2 Cava sessions, you're gonna hear a lot of stories, man. And a lot of these stories are like, hey, do you think he bought into that? Oh yeah,
yeah,
isn't that
yeah.
hilarious? So yeah,
Well,
so
no,
just
Tua,
keep
one
that
more
in
thing.
mind.
Yes, one more thing. Like I said, usually when you're doing a doctorate thesis, you're only paid to go and find out and do your research for like 6 months or for a year. But then you probably need a lot more longer than that. So within that short time, you're filling in the gaps or saying whatever, and then you get it out there, and that's
So
that's where we get a lot of these inaccuracies for our history. But that's just my thoughts to
that
because I know.
dude, that is hilarious. That is so basically what you're telling me, Masi, if this is accurate, all these PhD guys are going in and they're writing their whole PhD thesis on Talanoa Loy from the Cava sessions.
That or they're grabbing, because like I said, they're only there, they're paid, and they're only in school for a certain amount of time, and they gotta
They got to
write
get their
something,
thesis in.
get
If
their
not, they won't
thesis, get it
graduate.
in. So they're going to where the Faikawa guys, maybe people they think they know, but they're they're not giving them the all that information at once, because like I said, their family treasures stories that's been passed down many years. And then not only that, they're trying their best to go find out the truths, and they gotta get it done within 6 months or whatever, and then it is what it is, right? And then when they get back, then when they become professors or whatever, they're still they're still learning, and they probably adding more knowledge, or even that sometimes their egos is
That
still
I,
they're
I
still
just
they're still
think
they're still holding on to what they wrote, and they're sticking to it because that's what
they
got
have
them.
to. They have
Yes,
to, right?
yes,
Because that's what they got their degree on. But I
yes.
just can't get out of my head how hilarious this idea is, Masi, because I think there could be a lot of truth to this. The same professor who now talks down, now that he's got his PhD,
Yeah.
will look down on the Cavatonga guys, right? That are
Mm,
drinking Cava. And it's like, man, telling their kids need to elevate, need to progress, which is true. We are all proponents of education. But here they are getting their PhD off of the Talanoa Loy from the Cavatonga guys, who they're now 10 years after their PhD are kind of looking down on the Cavatonga guys. But who has the last laugh? It's
yeah.
the guys drinking Cava every night when they hear the certain things. It's like, yeah, my story. My story that I shared 3 years ago. It's now in a journal of science now, and
Yeah.
now that the students of Auckland University are being taught my story.
Correct.
That would be so hilarious, man. I think that there's a real possibility to that, Masi.
Hey, I'm pretty sure that happens a lot. Like I said, because I've been there trying to. You only have a certain amount of time. You gotta get it done. You try to do your research as much and try to understand. And you want it the palangi way, right? You want to use it to get it concise. Get it concise. Go straight to the information. Be direct. But like he even Dr. Taria even mentioned, Tongans are very indirect, and I think you and I know this, Tua. The Tongans with time, it's a real thing. Tongan time is a real thing. So that can go for many, many, as long as whatever they want.
Oh
Tongan time is
man,
very different.
that is hilarious. I'm never gonna get over that, Masi. When every time I look at a PhD on Tongan history, I'm be like, wonder if 80% of this is from like
Yeah.
Cava sessions that he was in a hurry and you know. Anyways, let's come back. But that's a
All right.
great point. That is hilarious.
The first tradition that I want to touch on is the beginning of Tonga, or Tala Tupou Anga or Tonga. As you can see on the screen, I have summarized some notes on this tradition that Tala Kamataanga or Tonga is a story about Tangaloa. Tangaloa literally translated as the fisher god.
Mm.
And he was the first to make or to build a Tonga, a system in Tonga. And Tonga became a subsidiary dominion of the Tui Manoa, Samoa Atoa sovereignty. Now, I want to add on this information about Samoa Atoa, or the Tui Manoa for that. We are going back to Samoa, to the eastern part of Samoa. There is a group of islands there, 3 main islands, and that whole group of islands is called Manoa. And Tangaloa started the Samoa Atoa in Manoa. Samoa Atoa literally translated as all Samoa. And they were consisted of 6 main islands: Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, Tahiti, Rarotonga, and Oahu in Hawaii. Those are the islands that made up all Samoa, the old Samoa Islands. And you can see that Samoa Atoa, I interpreted it as the islands that gave the Tui Manoa the umiti, sacrifice of seafood. Tangaloa is the family name of the Tui Manoa. And in the story of beginning,
Ooh,
What's your
a
thoughts,
lot to
Tua?
cover there.
What's
Well,
your initial thoughts?
my initial thoughts are this. There's just so much here. I gotta
There,
rewind my
there is.
mind here.
There is.
Is number one, I need to understand. He's saying he's taking the position that Tangaloa is a god,
Yes.
which is a Western definition of
Yes.
Tangaloa. So once
Very,
again,
very Western perspective. He's definitely showing
yes,
his mind here.
and you know, Fisher God. That's
That's
That's not,
inaccurate.
yeah, I've never heard that personally. You know, as we talked about, like, Tangaloa was the title. And this is the other thing when he says the beginning, and this was another comment that was done on social media,
Yeah.
is they said, oh, you know, they talk about the Tongan beginning from Aho'eitu. It's like, hold on. That's not the beginning. That's the beginning of the Tu'itonga, right? But Tangaloa is the beginning of Tonga. And so, and that when Tangaloa resided on Tongatapu. So that's the other thing. I agree when he says, oh, the Tu'imanua descended from Tangaloa. Yes, we agree.
Yeah.
And that Tangaloa is the Tangaloa that lived on Tongatapu.
Yes.
And I don't know. Those are the first ones that come. I know there's other things he's brought up that I wanted to mention, but it's not coming to my mind right now, Masi. But
Yeah.
those are
No,
my initial thoughts.
No, my thoughts are like, I think his definition. I don't know if he really understands the definition of Tangaloa being a fisher god. I think he's pulled that from somebody else interpretation of that. But the correct definition of Tangaloa is, when they open, it's the long kind of tongue,
Mhm.
right? And it's kind of like, and that's like the spread of, pretty much his bloodline kind of around. So it's very popular against the Maoris. Still probably do the love the tikis of that, and some Polynesians do that, and that's what it means of Tangaloa. And you mention it, it's not a god. It was just a title. So actual human beings with bones and flesh. But so yeah, that's where I kind of thought about when he was speaking there, and also with the Tui Manua. He said it was a family, but he doesn't explain where did that family come from. They don't just show up from Manua or
Nowhere.
just grow. Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if he's able or has the knowledge to even go that deep, because of course I've heard they say it's a family name, but we're trying to argue where did it come from. We've
Mhm.
already kind of explained of Tangaloa being in Tonga, showing you the exact location where he resided in Tonga, and also its responsibility in Tonga with creating the Tui Tonga, which came out of that. I've never heard, like I've lived in Samoa during my 2 years there. I've never heard of the term umiti, that there were
Yeah.
some gatherings in Samoa for the Tui Manua, and there is no, I don't know where he got that from. I know there's been some books written about it, but I've never heard of people going there to Manua to pay tribute. The only tribute that we only know of, it was during the Tui Tonga era, everyone coming
Mhm.
to Tonga Tapu. And
Yeah.
that's you can also speak to the Fijians, with their history. They have history coming to Tonga, every Pacific island, in Polynesia, in the realm of the Tui Tonga Empire, came to Tonga. And prior to that, I don't think anyone went to Manua. So that's my issue there. If he were here, that's why I would ask,
The
where did he
questions
get
you would
that
ask.
from? Ask,
Yeah.
and there, like I said, if Manua was very significant, because we're talking about pretty significant, that's where it came from, there would be evidence of land movement or mounds being built in Manua, which there's nothing there. And I'm not being mean or anything, but that when you mentioned like a significant part of potentially creating the Tui Tonga line, because that's already there. But you're talking about the Tui Manua Tangaloa, creating the Tui Manua Empire, and then transitioning from there to the Tui Tonga. That's th- there's no evidence, and I can't get my mind there because
And
there's no evidence of that. So
well, and this is the thing that I find hilarious. Those who believe the Tu'imanua Empire, oh, well, where's your evidence? I was like, well, we
yeah,
show you all the evidence in Tonga, even the other islands. And then when we asked them, where's the evidence for the Tu'imanua? Did you say Tangaloa? We come
yeah,
from Tangaloa. And it's like, we aren't arguing that. We're just saying Tangaloa comes from Tongatap.
yes,
So that's something that I think that those with the Tu'imanua. And here's a couple things, Masi, that I just remembered.
yeah,
He says the fisher god. Okay.
yeah.
Why is that come up? Because Tangaloa was one pulling up islands or whatever.
But
Do you
wasn't that
know
Maui? Wasn't that Maui's job?
that is Maui's knowledge of astronomy and navigation?
That's different
Is that
responsibility. Yes, right, and
yes?
that's different. And see, that's where he's getting it probably mixed up, because that's a
Well,
Maui's job.
exactly. And the reason
Tangaloa is more of
why,
the political and the building of the
yes,
empire. Yeah, but
the
go ahead,
empire
Tor.
and and
Yeah,
and, and so yes, Maui functioned probably under Tangaloa, right? Because his role
yeah,
was the navigator. But the reason why it's called the probably in my mind, because I'm trying to understand where he got that term, but maybe he's getting that term because a significant constellation for navigating and trying to map where all these islands were Maui's hook, right?
mm,
The constellation, the one that's
mm,
Scorpio, that's
mm,
Maui's hook in the
mm,
constellation for Tongan astronomy.
mm.
That is a big reason why a lot of the oral history says, oh, they use the fish hook to pull up the islands, and maybe that's why he's saying that Tangaloa is the fisher god, because he fished up some of these islands, is because he's using that Maui's hook analogy. That's the only thing I can think of as to where he comes up with that. The other one is he mentions Fiji as one of these select
Samoan.
islands that was in that empire. As it number one, I was like, nobody has any real evidence of Samoan influence in Fiji. And Fiji, the only reason why Fiji is somewhat considered Polynesian is not because of Samoan influence, it's Tongan influence in Fiji. You
Yeah.
remove the Tongan influence in Fiji, Fiji is isolated as a Melanesian territory. It is because of Tongan influence in Fiji, of building kalias, of harvesting the wood there, and also wars and settling there, that Fiji is considered part of Polynesia. And I'm not aware of any of those other islands saying that there was a nation called Samoa or a Tu'imanua Empire.
Well, and that's the funny thing too. You remind me when he said, and this is like a lot of the flaws in his knowledge here. We know that Samoa didn't exist. He's using the much modern term Samoa Atoa. Samoa Atoa meaning the Tuimanua Empire. That didn't exist, because the Samoa was only created as a when the colonization. Because I'm sure they were when referred to Upolu, Savaii are much older names than Samoa as a whole. Tutuila,
Exactly.
Manua, those were the names of the islands. And back in the days in Polynesia, I think wherever you came from, because we were all one people, it's where what name of island you came from, probably your clan you come from, instead of like this whole kind of nation.
No, 100%. And you hit on it on the head, Masi. It was the clan. The Tongan word for Samoa is Ha'amoa.
Yes.
It was the clan. They used they came from Tonga. They used the rooster as a navigational tool,
Yes.
right? For some of their, and so they came from Tonga to Samoa, and that's where the majority of Ha'amoa comes from.
Yes.
We make a special exception for the Tu'imanua because why? Direct descendants from Tangaloa, which is a close relative to the Tu'itonga. So they're not of the Ha'amoa, they're of the Tu'imanua. This is why the Tu'itonga maintained a relationship with the Tu'imanua. But as for the rest of the islands, they were of the Moa clan. And that's why Tongans refer to Samoa as Ha'amoa. It's not a nation, it's not a territory. It is that's where the Moa clan live. When they left Tonga, that's where they went and stayed. And so, I mean, that's I mean, we're all having the conversation here, and we'll see where he goes. We'll come back to him, but so far we see a lot of discrepancies from the oral history that we're familiar with, that we've heard, and some of this oral history is very close to our family. So we'll see where he continues with this conversation.
Okay.
It begins with an impregnation of an eel, in Tongan, Towia or Futuna. It set up the story with a fish eel that was impregnated, and she later gave birth to 4 sets of mixed twins. Mixed twins, the male, female, the 4 pairs. And in turn, these 4 pairs entered into a relationship, incestuous relationship, where they produced the Tangaloa family, one of them.
Any thoughts on that, Masi? Have you heard of that story?
No, and like I said, I'm not familiar with that story of, because he's saying that these twins created the Tangaloa. Is that correct?
Yes. One of the sets of these twins.
Twins. Well, see, and that's my question. So, where did is he trying to refer that they were in Samoa already and creating these Tangaloa, because our version, like the coming from Vahi from the Americas, Tangaloa came from there with that knowledge with people, including the Maui clan, and then the Taula, the Pulotu folks. How many people
Yeah.
that came from there? I'm not. I'm
He
sure there was
here.
enough to populate the islands of Tonga, and not only that, because there were some people who first stopped in Tonga, stayed in Tonga for a little bit, spread to Samoa and other parts of Polynesia. But that's my understanding of that. I'm not too sure where this all started, but I'm assuming he's talking about when they're in Manua. But yeah.
Yeah. So here's the inconsistencies that I see just within his narrative here.
Hmm.
He calls Tangaloa a god, and
Yeah.
then in this story here, which I've never heard of, because the oral history I heard of on the origins of Tangaloa and that family is the worm that's cut into three pieces by the Q,
Correct.
right? And Kohai Koa Momo, that
Yes.
story, and that's where the origins of Tonga come from, and one of those being the Tangaloa clan. But what I'm getting to is the first point at the top says the fisher god, Tangaloa. Then
Hmm.
he's saying, no, actually, there was a eel impregnated, had twins. And then it looks like later he's going to get into that the Tangaloa family. So now we went from God to a family that exists in person, in flesh, which now we're getting an agreement. At least we're agreeing.
Yes.
But there's some inconsistency of, so was Tangaloa a god or a mortal? So
Mm,
there's a big jump there from what I'm seeing,
mm,
because he started off he's a god, but now he's saying, oh, it was actually a family that led to the Tu'imanua.
yeah.
So how did we go from being a god to being a mortal and
Mm,
coming from male and female?
yeah.
So I don't see the consistency in the story there.
Mm.
So anything else, or you want to
No,
jump back
no,
into it?
no. I mean, that's correct.
Now, the important point that I want to touch about this is from this story is the creation of the social political status of Fahu in Tonga. And this story here of the beginning is about that creation of the Fahu social system. Fahu is very central in Tongan society, and who is regarded as the highest rank position in Tongan society. And Fahu refers to the sacred royal blood of Tangaloa, which is known in Tongan as Totoi Eiki. And it is supposed to contain within the family. And how to do that is done by incestuous, in an incestuous way.
Any thoughts on that?
Um, I think we will do one probably with Danny too, with how kind of the how Fahu system kind of started. But
Yeah,
I I'm sure like what we talked about. I don't think Fahu was used for the political sense. It was more of an um, an acknowledgement and high rank within family affairs, within a family affair,
correct.
right? And I think that's a misinterpretation. And I think that's part of the plan for a future episode is to have an episode regarding that. But that's my understanding that the older female side of the family is acknowledged through family affairs. It wasn't used in a way of political authority because the political and inheritance was on the male side. But
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
so that's where I feel like um, he's having that thing incorrect, or I disagree with him on that because it's more of a family tie of recognizing the older sister and her offspring. Yeah.
And this comes back, and you mentioned this in the past as well, Masi. this shows that the ideas that he's generating this from is from a Samoan perspective,
Mm.
because political power does not go through the matriarchal line.
Yes.
It seems like that's something that's generally accepted in Samoa as a practice.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that may be driven because of the female always marrying to the Tuitonga. And so back
Yes.
in Samoa, that is where the rank and role of power is, especially when the young males before they became Tuitonga were always in Samoa with their
Yes.
mothers. So
And
their
their family
mothers
and
within
clan.
their families are much more influential because of that. But in Tonga, that's not the case. And one would make the argue that is one of the reasons why the Tuitonga would never allow his sister to marry a Tongan in Tonga.
Mm.
That was another thing, is because why? He
It was-
didn't want other Tongans within, and it's not political. This is all social.
Yes.
He
Yes.
didn't want to have someone locally at a quote unquote higher position in him within the family. It was to
Yes.
maintain to separate the social familial influence from the political, because the Fahu had zero political power, had zero religious power, because
Yes.
the religious power of the Tuitonga and the political and the military power was always through the males. And so I think that way of thinking that he's had is showing us where these ideas are coming from. They are not coming from Tonga, because in Tonga, the Fahu has zero political power.
Yeah.
It has social influence within the
Family affair.
the family affairs,
Or your
but in
kainga.
politics
Yes.
and government, it has zero
Yeah.
authority. So
No.
I think he's
Yeah.
slow, he's slipping and showing where these ideas are coming from. They're not coming
No.
from Tonga.
Tonga. No, and you're correct too. With the especially the Tuitonga, and if he had um, sisters, or the Tuitonga had daughters and stuff, it was very common. Like Salamasina, coming from her mother was a Tuitonga, daughter of the Tuitonga, was sent to Samoa, married the high chief in Samoa, created Salamasina, who is the only person that I know of to hold all the Samoainga titles, which is all the kind of the four big titles in Samoa. And then it's also some love stories of the Tuitonga's daughters going to Fiji, just with
Yeah.
that same thing. So it doesn't make it too complex, because within the family, you can always make things political. And if you marry
Yeah.
somebody like in Tonga, you can make things political in family affairs and stuff. So there's a reason that was done that way. But yeah, the Fahu, I think you are right where he's hitting, because in Samoa it is very common that even if, like I said, there was a Tui Manua title holder that was a female, married an American Pa'alangi, a Caucasian man, and they had an offspring, and then that offspring was the Tui Manua
Tuimano.
title, which in Tonga that would never fly, no matter how you want to pull it, it would never fly in Tonga. But that's a very popular Samoan thing, and that's probably where he's kind of deriving a lot of his thinking from. But
Yeah.
good points.
No, 100%. Let's he's gonna go into this Miti stuff, which doesn't make any sense to me, but we'll give him the opportunity
Okay.
here.
This R82 is said to be the first putative Tuitonga, but really it's about the formality of a Tongan socioeconomic system. R82 is in Samoan, Asoaitu Refolasa, is a reference to the sacrifice food given to the Manoa. And Manoa in that story of R82 is also known as Lefolasa. And Lefolasa is associated with the appointment of the three main titles in the beginning of Tonga. And they are the Tuitonga, kingship title, and the two advisory supporting houses, Tu'iwhareua and Wharewha. So together with,
Does that sound accurate to you? The
I've never
Wharefa is the advisory
for the Tui Tonga.
for the Tuitonga.
Correct.
And I here's another thing that kind of is, I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Mhm.
Just because they have a Samoan name for Aho'etu, they think that means that they named Aho'etu. Okay, we have names for everything in Samoa that's in Tongan as well. So if we were just, oh yeah, you're not Samoa, you're Ha'amoa, right?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, oh, you're not Tu'imanua, you're Tu'imanuka. So does
Yes.
that mean if we were to use that logic, because we have different names for
Yeah.
everything in Samoa, that means, oh, you guys all come from Samoa? But I've noticed this trend that they go, oh, Aso Etu, la 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 la.
Yeah.
So that's why
Yes.
he's Samoa. And I was like, no, just because you have a different pronunciation of it doesn't mean that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And then also
Yeah.
the and I think talk on that, Mussy, and then I will pull up the other document that kind of shows the Wharefa and that stuff here for
Okay.
us to kind of discuss.
Yes. Well, I'll just touch on the umiti. Like I said, I don't know where that came from. If that was such a significant thing, they would have found, because I think you mentioned it in our kind of earlier episodes, to a lot of the resources or materials they find in Tonga were 60% were from outside of Tongatapu. And that was because of the tributes they would bring from all over the empire of Polynesia to the Tuitonga. If umiti was such a practice that was practiced back then in Manua, they would have found materials that's in Manua that are not from there.
Yeah.
There's no, and that's why he's saying he's only mentioning seafood. But like I said, if you're really a powerful influence in Polynesia, people are not bringing seafood all the time. We have stories of, like, yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
there's a lot of flaws. Samoans were known to bring, the ie, the fala, from Samoa to Tonga, and a lot of their precious rocks. Has a lot of precious materials or rocks that would come also from Samoa to Tonga to make, tools and stuff in Tonga. But not only that, Fiji was known for other materials too. They will come to Tonga. Like, each island nations wouldn't just, I mean, bringing seafood is very, let's just say, if that's your best, that's not an indicator of your island doing much work or doing much, not being productive. So
Yeah.
there's a flaw in that when he's talking about the umiti, which is very weak to say it was a seafood ceremonial practice in Tumanua. But that's just my thoughts on that, Tua.
No, and I agree. I mean, you're not bringing something unique. Seafood is everywhere
Yeah.
in all the islands, and I agree with that. And honestly, never heard of it. I mean, we eat miti all the time when we were young. Does that mean somebody was bringing us a special tribute for throughout the empire when we'd eat miti growing up? Whareua, and that, like, the trend that what we see here is the Wharefa for the first Tuitonga, Aho'etu, right? When Kaulfonua established the Tuiha Takalaua, there was a Wharefa for that,
Yes.
right? The Tuikanukupolu.
Seems like they only took one, Tua. Is that because that Hakiri going down, was that
Yes,
like he was just taken within that 45 to assist the Tuigan Polo with setting that up and advising Mata?
advising in that role. But the Whareua, I don't know where some of this stuff's coming from. But
Yeah.
the typical pattern is a Wharefa, and that's what we've always heard. I mean,
Yeah.
even down to setting up the Taumafa Cava for Tupou the first, it was the Wharefa that established that. So I'm not quite sure where this
Whareua.
Whareua comes from, because it does not seem to match the typical pattern that we've seen in the past.
Mm.
So I'm trying to understand that a little bit better. But that doesn't make sense to me.
No,
So
and if this Dr. Tariai was ever sees this or somebody knows
yeah,
of
we'd love to have a
Dr. Tari,
conversation.
we would love to have a conversation because, like you said, we're all just learning. We're not being mean or anything to kind of pick at it because these things we want to discover and uncover the truth. And these are some of the questions we want to ask, and that would probably be a good question to even ask him. Where exactly is the Fareua? Is he getting this idea from? Because yeah, it's always been Farefa from the Tangaloa, because Tangaloa actually created the
Yeah.
Tuitonga and the Farefa.
And I'm trying to understand here. See, and this is where these things are all great, but socioeconomic system for the Tuitonga. Where or how was that established? What socioeconomic system? What was the thinking or the structure behind it? Because one of the things that I have seen over and over in Tongan history, the significance of structure, and everyone knows their role.
Bro.
And you can only educate people on their role when you can explain it to them and why and how things are structured the way they are. And this is where I think this Tu'imanua idea and what the doctor here is sharing, that's what it's lacking a little bit. Is okay, you proposed an idea, give us some of the ideas that back it. What's the structure behind it? Because no one else seems to be aware of what the structure is. But if you're proposing an idea, let us know the structure a little bit.
Yeah.
So okay,
No,
we'll come back.
This tradition of our to end the Talakamata'anga that I talked about earlier before, together these two traditions are the foundation, set up the foundations of Tongan society that we know today. Still practiced today in Tonga, the incestuous relationship, mainly, especially in the royal family and the chief of Tonga.
That is a little bit true today, but here's another inconsistency. The Tuitongans were always marrying outer islands.
Correct.
Samoa. So this is not necessarily an incestuous relationship.
Yeah.
That is something that's a little more common today because why the empire has shrunk.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And even then, we still have certain royalty in Tonga marrying into Samoa, like Ma'atu.
Bafu,
right?
Yeah. Ma'atu, correct.
Yeah. He married into a Samoan girl. And they're still in the royal family marrying within themselves now. But that seems to be more a function of the shrinking of the Tuitonga Empire rather than this being a standard practice, because a lot of the oral history says the Tuitonga's mothers were always from other islands.
Correct. Yeah.
They intermarried one another. For the purpose of keeping the sacred blood, royal blood inside, and also the economic system of exchange goods, which I think is very important for historians to recognize in their work of writing up Tongan history.
There's another contradiction there in my mind.
What is it?
He talked about the Tu'imanua system was the miti, the seafood, and then yet for the Tongan system, how important exchange of goods are. Right? If you don't make something out of nothing, so you're telling me we went from seafood and a Tu'imanua empire that was how many islands? 6 or 7 islands. To start one little new socioeconomic system, and that system of one island that was subject to the Tu'imanua was built on the exchange of goods.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. The exchange of goods of the Inasi and the Polo Polo was thousands of miles apart,
Yeah.
right? And that's what
Mm.
drove it. It was the belief that the Tui Tonga descended from Tangaloa, and that
Yes.
Tangaloa
The
was a
creator of all.
ancient,
Yes. It was
yeah,
the
of the
creator of
entire empire.
Polynesia. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what drove the exchange of goods.
Yes.
Here he has simplified it to the Tu'imanua and Tangaloa in creating a small fractional power within the Tu'imanua developed this concept. That's a little bit hard for me to see how that makes sense personally.
Mm.
So
No,
and
you hit it. You hit it all in the correct spots, Eduardo.
Now, I want to touch the other part of the problem that I touch on the oral versus written about the Tupou family. Tupou family is the family name of Tuikanaupolu, who are the current ruler of Tonga. And the family name is Tupou. Now, the significance of the Tupou family in Tonga is the beginning of writing the history of Tonga. Tupou the first, who first introduced Tonga into Western culture by way of bringing in Christianity into Tonga, and of course the construction of the 1875 Constitution.
okay, couple things there that I wanna talk about. So I think I know
Go for
where
it.
he's going now.
Go for
That's
it.
the reason why he mentioned Queen Salote in the beginning, because Queen Salote is starting to write down, quote unquote, Tongan history.
Mm-hmm.
And he is indirectly claiming that she intentionally started with Ulaki Mata instead of Aho Eitu to
Mm-hmm.
try to hide that we come from Samoa, because that's what he's saying. He's saying we have to go all the way back to Aho Eitu, but Queen Salote wanted to start with Uluwaki Mata. And then he's going to come back to, the Tupou family. The Tupou family is the one who introduced writing and Christianity. So really, they are subjectively choosing to only write a certain part of the Tongan history. And that's why he's saying oral history is important, is he needs to go back and reestablish a history of coming from Samoa with the oral history that he's bringing to the table, which, once again, we agree oral history is important, but I don't know where 90% of his oral history is coming from. And even then, within his discussion on the oral history, there's significant gaps and inconsistencies. For example, Tangaloa. How do we go from Tangaloa as a god to, two humans made the Tangaloa family? There's a big jump there. His understanding of the definition of Tangaloa in regards to relation to Maui, there's a lot of issues there. And here, the other thing I want to bring to the table here is Tupou the First did not introduce Christianity, right?
Yeah.
There were others like the Tuikanikupolu was Area Motua was already on Tongatapu. He was a Christian.
Yeah.
And so that was actually where the Tuikanikupolu line comes from. And they had already adopted Christianity. So there's some nuances. I think he's trying to paint a picture that the Tupou family came in, they brought Christianity, they brought in writing, and then they are negatively hiding our Samoan origins. That's where I'm kind of feeling any things that I may be missing there, Masi, or you disagree. But that's what I'm thinking right now from what I'm hearing.
I really don't have an opinion on that because I'm still trying to. Yeah, I mean that's good that you're trying to figure out where he's coming through and his kind of purpose. I'm not. I guess I'm not there yet to understand what his purpose. But I mean, so far from what I've seen, I've kind of agreed with Tupou, creating the constitution, the Tupou name, the Tuikang Polu that they kind of they're the current rulers now. So I mean, to me, from what I see, just on what he kind of mentioned, is out of all his presentation is one of the
So
things
far,
that
it's
I
been
so far, yeah, been
yeah,
correct from most Tongan history that's been taught about Tonga. But yeah.
10-4. Yeah, we'll come in, but that's that's just my thoughts. We'll see where he goes from there. Is
which is a construction that subsequently abolished the Tuitonga title.
okay. Once again, Tupou the First did not abolish the Tuitonga title.
Mm,
Laufiri Tonga said, "I will relinquish it." There was
yes.
never a battle. There was never Tupou the First or the Tuikanukupolu subverting
Yes.
the Tuitonga. The Tuitonga, and like we've talked about, pretty miraculous, right? That he, out of his own volition, understanding that if the Tuitonga and the Tuikanukupolu were to squabble, Tonga would be lost. And
Mm,
so the Tuitonga said, you know what? The path forward is you're my cousin. It's the same family. You have that power right now, and us trying to fight over it is gonna be a bad thing for our family and for our people.
yeah.
He relinquished it. So he didn't abolish it. That's I mean, these are
Yes.
some of the nuances that we're saying he's missing out on, and
Yes.
he's
No.
not bringing those to the table.
No. You're correct too, and not only that, you're correct with Lau Fritonga. Even went further than that. Even instructed the Farefa to transition some of the protocols and construct Taumafakawa for Tupou the First. So because
Yeah.
that was significant for the people to see that this is a legitimate leader of Tonga, and that's when he says it'll be with me, and like what you said, relinquish, and it did stay with him. And part of that transition too was, I think it's either one or two generations. Tonga waited; they just kind of left it those titles, and then they created the new titles. Even if they did the Tupou the First also did it with the the Tupou family did it, the Tui Polo did it with the Tui Hatagalawa. Eventually, they waited after the last Tui Hatagalawa passed away. I think they waited many years just to change, and it's the same family blood ties, but changed the name to Tungi, and that's the
Yeah.
Tungi we have today. Same thing with the Tui Tonga, waited many generations, changed the name, but you still have that family ties to the Tui Tonga. They changed it to Kalanivalu, which is still
Yes.
today. It's because it just creates, let's just say it just creates just some what is it, what would you call it to us, just proper etiquette, because you don't want,
Yeah.
because everyone knows those two titles are superior to the Tuikanu Polo. So just to make things proper, and
To
it's like
maintain
a
the
tongue,
structure. The structure
maintain the
hasn't
structure. Yes.
changed, right? So we
Yes.
can maintain the social order and the
Yes.
cultural structure, but the political and the military power is with the Tuikan Kupolu, which now is the Tuikan Kupolu and the Tuiha
Yes.
Takalaua lines have been
Yes.
combined. And
Yes.
so now it's really the only line that still sits somewhat separate
Yes.
is the Tuitonga line through Kalanival.
Correct. Because of the
But
yes.
yes.
Well, no, I was gonna say to that's correct. But I'm just thinking they had to change names too, and change the title names, because we all know they were higher rank. Because when you
Yeah.
do the Cava, Taumafa Cava, or you do your Cava ceremony, you don't want to use the Tuitonga title, because
Yeah, for
everyone will know
political
that's
reasons.
a higher
Yeah.
rank. Yes. So there's a reason why they changed the name to today. But yeah, you're right on that. But
Yeah.
the blood ties are still exist today.
And these are the type of nuances that just shows the complexity of understanding politics and
Yes.
understanding how to maintain structure on a cultural sense without having to reorganize, because that leads, when you break up the structure, it actually opens you up for weaknesses. So what
Yes.
you can do is, like what you were saying, is we're not going to change the structure in detail by pulling pieces
Yes.
apart. We're just going to rename them,
Yes.
and then we maintain the structure and everything continues moving forward.
To flow. Yes. Yes.
10-4. No, I agree.
And independence from Samoa Atoa happened in this time of the Tupou family. I've
Okay.
What's your thoughts?
He just said that we got independence from the Tu'imanua through the Tupou family. So we're talking like 1800s? Really? That's when
Yeah.
we got independence
Yeah.
from Samoa?
Yeah. There's a lot of Well, and that's why I say whoever knows this guy, I don't know him. Like I said, I'm only familiar with the Okushi Tino Mahina pushing the idea of Tui Manua and the Tui Pulotu. But yeah, I've never heard of Tariai, and whoever knows him or has connections to him, we would love to
We'd
do an
love to
episode.
talk. Yeah.
Yes,
Because
we
here's
have so much questions. Yeah.
here would be my question. So if it's 1800s, we're talking about this is not far in Polynesian genealogy, right? This is your great, maybe our third great grandfather. How many of them were going to Samoa Atoa giving tribute?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're talking 1800s. How often to Tupou the first go to Samoa to give tribute? Never. Nobody has heard of this. How many of anyone in the Pacific I'll give you the 1500s. I'll go back 900 years. How many if we just got our independence through the Tupou family?
Yeah.
Which is this is kind of,
It's a bit stretching. You're really stretching it. Yeah.
I think it's broken. Like I was willing to consider certain things, but when you're saying we only got our independence from the Samoa Atoa Tu'imanua like in the 1800s through Tupou the first, dude, that don't even mesh, because why? Every other Tu'imanua claim that I've heard is because of the Tu'ikanukupolu, and that was Samoan, and that's the rulers of today, and that's how Samoa originated. So there's contradiction there. So did the independence of Tonga come through the Tu'ikanukupolu, or is the influence of Samoa because of the Tu'ikanukupolu? There's contradictions from those who believe in the Tu'imanua origins there that don't make sense.
Oh, great point, Tor.
touch a lot about Gonzalo earlier on in my talk.
Oh, there we go. Let's come back
The
there.
importance of criticism in writing history. Criticism is about the distinction between subjectivism and objectivism. That as a historian or critic, we have to be objective as opposed to being subjective, which is a main feature of biographical history that I touched on earlier on in my talk. And add on to that, my conclusion is the theme leaping into the unknown. I think it's very important that we go back to the beginning, to oral tradition, which is the beginning. I think that's all for now. And I thank you for listening. Malo.
Malo Tariai.
Mahalo Abito Tariai. And I know from that closing that you understand that criticism is part of the discussion, and that's what we're doing. Is trying to look objectively at what he's saying. And I think it comes back to the hypothesis we discussed earlier. He is challenging Queen Salote's biography of history by saying, starting at Ulaki Mata, that was I don't want to say deceptive, but it is inaccurate statement of history because it doesn't go far back enough to Aho'eitu to establish that we come from the Tu'imanua and the Tu'imanua from Tangaloa and Samoa. So I think that's really, it came down to that.
Okay.
And here's my criticism and I agree, oral history is important, but believe it or not, oral history suffers from the same thing if I use his terms, that biographical history has. Because why? Oral history is subjective to do things. What you want to believe, where you come from, and what you think you heard. Because his critique, and this is where it comes back to the beginning, Masi, where he said, like, biographical history is just an autobiography of your perspective.
Yeah.
That is also true of oral
With
history.
oral, yeah.
Right? Oral history, who established the stories of how Tangaloa used the hook and Maui used the hook to discover the islands?
Yeah.
It was the Tangaloa and the Maui families who
Yeah.
told the people, this is how we operate. And then it is also within each individual family what piece of the puzzle that they hold, which in many ways is still subjective. And even our observation, and this is something that I even have this criticism. Have you ever heard of the dual slit experiment, Masi, on electrons?
No.
Okay.
What is it?
So electrons, scientists were trying to figure out if electrons are matter or waves. So when you shoot an electron and it goes through, you have two slits, means two openings, and you imagine shooting the electron like shooting tennis balls, right? If electrons are matter and you have two openings on a box and you cut two openings in it, if it's matter, you'll only have two lines in the back hitting the wall. Does that make sense what I'm saying? But if it's a wave, it'll hit and then you'll have multiple lines behind the slit. So what scientists did was this. They would shoot the electron and then they would watch it. And the electron would behave like matter. It would only have two lines at the back. Like you take a box, a cardboard, you put it 3 feet in front of the wall, you cut two holes, two thin squares or rectangles. When they would watch the electron, it would just show two lines in the back of the wall. But when they weren't observing the electron, trying to track it, it behaved like a wave. And they couldn't understand it. Like, what the heck? So you're telling me the electron will behave one way when I'm looking at it, and then when I'm not looking at it, it'll behave differently. So what I'm trying to get to, and it's a overly complicated example, is that is the same about history. We can try to look objectively, but we all have bias. You and I can look at the same event, same data, and come up with very different conclusions. Right? The mere fact that we're observing something in many ways will affect the behavior of the incident, just like the electron. When you look at the electron and you track it, it behaves as matter. When you're not looking at it, it behaves as a wave. And so that is one of my biggest critiques of the scientific method, because the scientific method, and I'm not saying it's not valuable, the scientific method is fantastic. It's brought us medicine, technology. What you and I are able to do now is because of the scientific method. But we try to look at objectively that even the scientific method has weaknesses. Because why? The scientific method is you develop a hypothesis, you create an experiment, you observe the experiment, you record the outcome, and then you compare the outcome to your hypothesis. What the dual slit experiment proves, by simply observing, you are impacting the experiment. You could be impacting the experiment, because why? Even when you look at an electron, it will behave differently by simply observing it. And what I'm getting to is in regards to his thesis that, Queen Salote's history is autobiographical because it's just her perspective. I believe in the oral history, but the oral history suffers from the same problem. Everybody has their own perspective, and we're all just trying to put as many pieces together and then make up our own decision on what we're seeing. Just like what we try to do with the viewers here is we present our ideas. We would love other people to present theirs, and then just let people decide what they want to believe.
Yeah, you get to decipher which argument, which idea is sound, and that's all we want. We want to just try to discover the truth of Polynesia's origins. But I was just going to add too to the only reason why I said this could be done in New Zealand, because one, if they were going to do it in Tonga, why I'm pretty confident because there's certain people, or maybe they decline to go. But I'm just thinking there's a lot of capable, especially in Tonga, with certain origins of history that they will be able to really
Rather
expand
than
on.
bring the New Zealanders over there.
Yes, and that's why, and I know I mentioned in the beginning, but that's why I feel like this was done in New Zealand, and he was there, or TEDx was just they only want to bring academic people. I don't know, but to me, that's why I felt like it wasn't. I didn't feel like it was in Tonga because I feel like there's a lot of, especially you're talking about Tongan origins, very capable people in Tonga today that can really expand on the origins on that. But that's why I say this was probably done in New Zealand, but they put Nuku'alofa there.
Yeah, I'm trying to see here if there's any description on it, but I don't see a description saying that it was held in Tonga.
Okay.
Okay.
If it was held in Tonga, then that's probably bad on TEDx. They didn't. But it's okay. Everyone is just trying their best. Like I said, we would love to have Taliai on whoever of our viewers know of him, because we would love to have this discussion,
this conversation.
Respectful way.
Yeah, and we appreciate Doctor here, Opeti, for being willing to put it up here. We love it. We want more people to put ideas out there. We are by no means saying he can't go online and share his beliefs. We want that. We want the conversation. We want to have the content out there so we can listen and come up with our own conclusions. And that is our hope here for the Polynesian Eyes podcast. We appreciate everyone's time here. Masi, any last words before we close it out?
Nope. I appreciate the viewers' thoughts. They've been very active the past few weeks now. Appreciate your thoughts and comments. We just kind of go through them, and then occasionally through episodes we'll always try to do like a couple at the end or in the beginning or in the middle. So appreciate you guys' thoughts and views, and just keep on coming.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I'm glad you brought that up, Masi. I want to thank Victor Crum. He's the one that recommended this video for us to respond to. So please continue to have the feedback and more suggestions. And with that being said, we appreciate everyone's time. Have a great one, and until next time, stay safe.
See ya.
See ya.